was just, yeah. The
Yeah,
conversation
great.
like you do a panel is way easier than doing a
Yeah,
presentation.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Well, you have some really great stuff to say about it all and some great experience and insight to bring to it. So it's fascinating.
Yeah. Well, I look
Absolutely.
forward to seeing how it all comes together.
Yes, indeed. We'll keep you posted. And yeah, thanks for all your help and input and obviously for looking at the book and all that.
You're not being deliberate in your design and your mapping, and you're not thinking about this as a human transformation and a ways of working transformation, then we can hollow out our skills and our critical thinking very, very quickly. And I think we tend to think of it as succession planning in the long term, but actually you can see people's skills disappearing within weeks when they get over
Right.
reliant. Like if you just say,
Right.
write this for me, you haven't done the thinking that got to the piece of writing in the first place. And you
Yeah,
get
absolutely.
further away from actually what you thought the question was. Need.
We're basically looking at the whole conversation around developing judgment and things like taste and a sense of context, relational capacity, all these kind of human capacities that end up being extremely valuable, if not absolutely critical to doing a good job, particularly, at a higher level in the organization. And these are the sorts of things that we see potentially getting kind of challenged and undermined by the kind of spread of AI use. So I guess when we think about our careers and obviously wanting to ask you about your kind of 30 years plus of, high level expertise and experience, how did you find your career progressing and how might it be different moving forward? But how did it work out for you?
Yeah. As you said, 30 plus years is a bit frightening. I feel really old all of a sudden when you say it that way. But
We're
I
we're
started
all
off,
feeling the same way.
I know, I know. I started off as a grad in a management consulting firm. So I remember my first day, we had a formal learning day, and about 2 hours into that, they came in and said, you need to go to a client, go now. And that was it.
Gee,
That was
okay.
my formal learning. So I literally went out to this client site and got told, you're the PowerPoint girl. And I was like, okay.
Yeah.
And someone had
Straight
shown me
in.
PowerPoint the night before. So I was like, okay,
Amazing.
fully equipped. And I think really over the years that I was in that firm, and that was sort of in Australia and in Ireland and the UK and sort of working around the world, a lot of what I learned was by watching other people. So we were often in small project teams. We would have 2 or 3 analysts, a consultant, a senior manager, a director, a partner, and they'd all have different roles. And
Yeah.
some people were in the room all the time. But you were just watching them, how they handled the team, how they worked with the client, depending on who the client was it more the middle manager? Was it the sort of executive team member that was in the room at the time? And so I was learning the technical task, how do I do PowerPoint or how do I do Excel or how do I learn a supply chain or whatever it might have been on the day. But I was also just watching how do they handle themselves? How do they solve a problem? All of those sorts of things. How do they handle a client in an informal situation versus in the formal presentation on the day that we're doing delivery? And so a
Was
lot
there
of,
a specific thing that happened that you can kind of remember that where you realized that's how you do that you might never
yeah,
have learned if you hadn't witnessed it?
I think when it was getting tense, so I've definitely seen moments where everyone's very collegiate and it's all going well. And then you might have a more senior client member come in and be like, I'm not happy with this. Or I actually remember being on one project where one of the partners got asked to leave because they weren't happy with the direction of the project. And so just watching how do we respond in these moments of tension? How do we, or we've got 2 or 3 really good outcomes that we're like, well, it could go this way or this way. What do we want to present? And how do we actually decide? So a lot of it's not so much the expertise, like the technical knowledge, but it's the judgment and the
Mm.
trust with the client around what should we do in this moment. And a lot of the sort of situational awareness of what's the politics, what's the relationships, what else is going on at the moment that we haven't thought about, and that actually maybe we're not the most important thing today because this is blown up in the media today. So all of that stuff of just watching the more experienced people in the room and learning from that and knowing when to push forward, when to pull back has all been about the more experience of the longer I'm in my career and the different organizations and clients I've
Mm.
worked with, the more I get that sense of judgment, which I guess is part of what we're going back to around your career.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Such a fascinating and really critical kind of difference that we often kind of miss, that you made the point that the difference between expertise and judgment. And of course, what, technology and AI in particular is giving us is access to a lot of expertise, a lot of knowledge, a lot of kind of how to, but
Yeah.
it doesn't necessarily kind of give us the judgment that goes with it, which is
Yeah. I
huge.
think the AI is kind of can tell you the what, but it doesn't necessarily, it can tell you when, why, how, but it doesn't necessarily know the situation to give you the right advice on that. And
Right.
that's where I think you need your own experience. We need to be talking to others in the organization of, okay, I've kind of got this technical what, but
Hmm.
should I be doing it? And how should I be doing it? And when should I be doing it? Are completely different questions.
Right. I think also
Yeah.
another thing that you kind of, I think you learn from people that you don't learn from a machine is kind of tone of voice, right? So, how you show up, how you present, how you ask a question, how you respond to, as you said, those difficult moments. They're key because, you can have all the knowledge in the world and all the expertise in the world, but if you can't articulate that in the right way or respond in the right way, control your emotions in the right way, it's all for naught, really.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree with that. It is, I said, it's more that situational side of things, and that there's a playbook, there's like a code of conduct, and there's a formal way of doing things, and then there's an informal way of doing things.
Yeah.
And that's where your relationships and your being in the office and absorbing how things are done. And even if you're in a client situation, observing how they do things and then making that judgment call of, okay, I need to be louder or softer, or I need to change my tone here, or that information is not as relevant to this person, but actually there's a story I have that is more relevant to them. So it's that constant switching of what's important in this particular moment. And I think a lot of that comes from learning from others and kind of just building that muscle yourself.
Absolutely. I'd say, it just makes me think of a situation in my own career where I learned absolutely from watching and would never have picked up this sort of level of judgment without it. And that was in my days working at record labels, the difference between conversations with an artist and conversations with that artist manager. Because ostensibly you're talking about the same things, and you can have a situation where you're talking to one or the other or both at the same time. And of course, the manager's thinking often, in terms of sort of business, the business of the art. The artist is also thinking of the business of the art, but also the art itself and the self-expression and all the rest of it. There's so many different nuances around it, which, it was only through seeing, my bosses as I was kind of coming up through the ranks do that and do that well. And also seeing sometimes where it was done badly, that you really figure out that
And I think
nuance and the judgment around it.
it's not just so much judgment there, but that empathy and relationship piece, which comes from, I think, more experience of learning actually how to build relationships as well. And I think, Rob, there around, it's not just so much the judgment of what to do on a difficult call, but how to be a good leader as well.
Yeah.
So, particularly in my early career where I had lots of different leaders, because you're on a project for 3 or 4 months and then you're switching to another person and another person, of what worked for me, what worked for the team, and then what really didn't. And what was I gathering in terms of my own kind of, who do I want to be as a leader when I grow up? And there's certain people that I, 30 years on go, I learned so much from you about what I wanted to be. And there's lots of people that I learned what I didn't want to be that I might not tell them about. But it certainly formed my own kind of leadership footprint of and the vision of what I wanted to be as well. So
brilliant.
I'm thinking about like moments where the traditional ways of learning and those access to those great leaders or the people the mentors that you're learning from. I think you've got some thoughts around how COVID probably was a forebear to what maybe AI might do in this context.
Yeah, I was thinking about that as we were sort of thinking about this podcast I used to sit on a floor a few years ago where the CEO and the office of the CEO were just literally walking distance. I was part of the corporate affairs team. So, and then there was the sort of a lot of the HR leaders were in the room as well. And I was not privy to every conversation. but I kind of knew what was going on. Like I kind of had a sense of the thing, the vibe of the place. And when we all went into lockdown for COVID, I suddenly realized a couple of months in that I was only in meetings where I was invited. I wasn't just necessarily hearing the conversations around me. I wasn't in the coffee room. I wasn't all of those sort of incidental moments where you learn. And I suddenly felt very out of the loop. And I didn't necessarily have to be in the loop from other people's perspective because it wasn't my job to be in the loop. But actually, all of that incidental knowledge helped me judge when to push, when not to push. Like I have an agenda, but everyone else has their agenda. And when should I play and when shouldn't I? And I really struggled in COVID to kind of have that context. And so much of judgment is context. And that's sometimes where AI will give you the information, but it doesn't know the context you're playing in, which is when you need to use your kind of relationships and your judgment and your sort of critical thinking to kind of go above and beyond the data. I felt like that's like a little bit of a precursor. The longer that we were in lockdown and not kind of just in general conversation, the more that I felt it removed. And if you rely only on AI, you drift further and further away from what the firm and the organization is actually trying to do and achieve.
Yeah. Yeah. Sort of like if you're head down in the machine, and I think probably all of us are kind of finding this now, that you get sort of absorbed by the power of the tool, whatever the tool is you're using and what you can achieve so quickly. But suddenly you realize like the days go, like literally Rob and I just had that conversation because we haven't spoken all day, and it's mainly because probably both he and I have just been working away, beavering away, doing our stuff, and then we're like, oh, we haven't spoken today. And it's I think that's the real risk, is that human connection, the storytelling, the other things that you can only learn by being face to face with somebody. Like that's the risk here, that we lose all of that.
Yeah, absolutely agree.
So yeah, on that note, then what are the things that you fear or you're already seeing kind of get taken out of that development process because of the presence of AI? What are those things you're seeing?
Yeah, look, I think we're seeing a lot of this in social media and in sort of more traditional media. How much of it's playing out, I think, depends on the sophistication of organizations and where they are on their AI journey. But there's a real concern that we over automate, that we kind of actually, and I think you guys talk about this, that the systems that we work in are already messy. And when you add AI on without understanding that messiness and maybe cleaning it up, you kind of just create more chaos. And you're also, if you jump straight to efficiency, what can we automate, without thinking about where were those moments where actually it looks tedious to someone on the outside, but that's where the person is learning, or that's where the person is spotting risk, or that is, or that is where they're judging and bringing a human element that a tool couldn't necessarily do. So I think we need to look and map each person's role and go, where can AI augment? Like, what are the true things that you can go, that just needs to be automated. That doesn't impact learning. It doesn't impact judgment. That's just a task that is repetitive and unhelpful to the human. And look at that versus what do we want to preserve, because it's the learning moment, it's the judgment moment, it's the risk management piece, or it's the relationship building with your colleagues, your supply chain, your clients, etc. So there's probably that real concern around, if you're not being deliberate in your design and your mapping, and you're not thinking about this as a human transformation and a ways of working transformation, then we can hollow out our skills and our critical thinking very, very quickly. And I think we tend to think of it as succession planning in the long term, but actually you can see people's skills disappearing within weeks when they get over-reliant. Like if you just say, write this for me, you haven't done the thinking that got to the piece of writing in the first place. And you get further away from actually what you thought the question was.
Yeah. And it's an interesting challenge, isn't it? On one hand, that's not a great situation, the human brain atrophying in front of our eyes. But for writing an email, right? I'm almost finding I'm like there now. Like I do suppress that urge to go to AI to kind of go, I've got to write this email for me. So I've got this like chief of staff agent that kind of knows my voice and can actually sound pretty accurately close to me. But on the flip side of all of that, that kind of like dumbing down, your ability to not to think about how to write a presentation or how to write an email kind of maybe starts to drift away. But at the same time, I've found my technical skills have kind of enhanced because I'm doing deeper work and more complex work that previously I wouldn't know where to start. Now I've got a way to find that mentor, which is a machine. But, I guess coming on to the subject of mentoring and recognizing the importance of that, you've obviously talked about spending a lot of time mentoring people over your career, but what do you think mentorship's going to look like in the workplace as we move forward, where a difficult answer is maybe just one prompt away versus how it used to be?
Yeah. Look, I've used mentors a lot, and sometimes it's just a one-off. Can I just have a conversation with you, or can I have a coffee with you? And there's no obligation to be my coach for the rest of my life. And then I've used people that I've kind of come back to on and off, throughout my career for advice. Sometimes it's the technical where I'm like, oh, I don't know how to use this Excel spreadsheet. And I just bother the person next to me and go, help me until they driven to distraction. I can use AI now for that. So there's a lot of technical things where I can just go, hey, Claude, help me with this. And it's kind of easy, and I don't have to take the time away from my busy colleagues. But I think there's still so much power in mentorship in that it then frees you up actually to not spend as much time on technical and to use that more for relationship development, to learn how they've dealt with a difficult situation or how they've navigated their career or made a significant shift in what they're doing. So I think in some ways it could make mentoring more powerful because it gets to focus more on the human relationship, trust and judgment building than it does on the technical expertise building. So maybe that is a good thing, but I think we just need to be really conscious that we are doing that. And also it's just not the formal mentoring, but just that incidental, again, the relationship building and talking to colleagues, where if you only go to AI for that technical question, and we're sort of touching on this before, if you've got the question wrong, you're going to get the wrong answer.
Right.
So if you go and talk to different people and you're gathering information and ideas and opinions from other people, you might realize that you had the context wrong, or that you'd misread something, or that you've got the wrong assumptions. And therefore your question becomes quite different. So if you only ask a narrow question, then you're going to get a narrow answer from AI. Whereas when you then start testing that with other people and who've got more experience or know the situation better, you can completely rethink what you're trying to achieve.
Yeah.
I think mentoring is going to be really important to kind of maintain, to push you. And AI can do that too. You can get an agent that forces you to think about your assumptions, but it's still based on what's in the system. It doesn't know that situational context.
Right.
And it doesn't know the politics and the relationships and all the other dramas that are playing out on the day. So I think the human piece is still really valuable. And I think I learned that a lot through sort of being in and out of sort of strategy type of work, is that if someone comes to you and says, can you write me a script, or can you do this? It's not necessarily what they needed. And it's up to you to push and go, so what is it that's going on? What's the situation? What's complicated? What's going on? Where's the issue? Then get to the question and then get to the answer, which might look completely different from what they came to you about.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the other thing that's so interesting about that mentor relationship, and this is something you've mentioned in our conversations before, is it's not just about the transfer of knowledge, expertise, experience, but it's also, there are so many other things in that personal relationship. And one of the things you brought up is like being the sponsor, being the advocate for the junior person.
Yeah. And that's absolutely so important. So again, if you're only working from home, or you're only you're in the office, but you're mostly on your screen, you're mostly going to AI, you're missing the opportunity to get to know people and for people to get to know you. So the less people know about you, the less they know about your ambitions, what you're good at, what you want to do next. And then when there is an opportunity, there's a room over there that you're not in, and they're like, oh, we need someone for this task. Or there's this internal secondment to New York. Who wants to go? And if they don't know you, they don't know that you want to go. And
Yeah.
so actually you're missing not only the relationship, but the sponsorship and the advocacy that will help build your career. And so this
Yeah.
comes back to how does AI impact mentorship, but how does it also impact your career progression? Even if you're keeping up with the trust and the experience and the judgment and those sorts of things, if you don't have the relationship, you will have less opportunity.
Yeah.
And that's what mentoring is all about, is actually people get to know you enough to sponsor you when you're not in the room.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
They're
When
an
you think
advocate
about
for.
the phrase, like it's who you know, not what you know, we're
Yeah.
kind of like, we're really enhancing the what you know and removing the who you know, which is, going to be
That's
problematic.
true. And it's interesting. There's lots of people on the job market at the moment. And one of the kind of core pieces of feedback is from recruiters is it's all around your networks, because it's so easy to apply on LinkedIn. You literally get AI to write your CV. Everyone's CV and cover letter look almost identical. Everyone's skills are inflated because it's all perfectly written for that particular job. And so it's really difficult for recruiters and leaders to understand what they're looking at. But if they know you already, or you've already had that coffee 6 months ago, then there's again a relationship and a trust piece there of actually, I'm confident that that CV is telling the story that I've witnessed myself.
Yeah.
And so
So,
I think the relationships and the networking is going to be really important when you've got 100 applicants in 2 hours for a LinkedIn or a Seek ad.
well, coming back to the mentoring part as well. Earlier, you were talking about the role of mentoring could actually just focus more on the human side, and arguably, therefore, more on the psychological side of the role, right? Which,
Yeah.
I think unless you get to a senior leadership position in an organization, you don't get a lot of help in that unless you privately go and find that kind of support, which is typically quite expensive. So having a business coach or somebody who's trained in the process of thinking through some of these human issues that are really not related to your job, they're related to you as a human being and how you can overcome those and then improve in your career and take advantage of the opportunities in front of you. But it sort of means that, I guess, if so much mentoring really ends up being about technical stuff, doesn't it? It is about like how to do the job. And in my experience of when I did the work, that's kind of tends to be where mentoring often sits, because the mentor doesn't necessarily feel they have the right skills to go into more of the personal stuff. And maybe sometimes they shouldn't. But it's sort of a question of, like, I guess, training of the mentor. Do we need to evolve that? Like, rather than people just putting their hand up and saying, yeah, I'll do that, and then kind of learning on the job, is there actually, do companies need to think differently about who is a mentor? What experience do they need? What training do they need to be able to do that work effectively in the context
That's a
of
really good point, actually, because we do tend to ask people, in workplaces, we're like, right, we're going to have a mentoring program, and you just get nominated as a mentee or a mentor without any formal training. And maybe some of what we're talking about is actually more formal coaching, where you are sort of paying someone externally to the organization to coach you, where you get some more of that safety piece to really dissect a situation and how to solve it. I remember I was at a bank a few years ago, and we had a lot of focus on mentoring. And because it was something that I always enjoyed, I actually started doing some information sessions with teams on how to be a good mentor and how to be a good mentee. So what are the hints and tips about both? And you will probably be both at the same time. You will have people mentoring you, and you will be mentoring other people. And how do you get really good at it? And like being prepared, having good questions, listening skills, knowing what you want out of the relationship, agreeing the dynamics of the relationship, all of those things are important. And also understanding, as I said before, that mentoring doesn't have to be a 6-month, 12-month, 15-year commitment. It can be 1 or 2 sessions where you're just helping someone kind of rethink a problem or rethink their career. And so it doesn't have to be as formal as it sounds, but a bit of training and understanding of the role is helpful.
Yeah.
It's interesting, like, as you're saying, some of the sort of the practical things that organizations and leaders and would-be mentors need to start thinking about. So if we broaden that out in really practical terms, what do leaders of today's organizations, tomorrow's organizations need to start doing proactively, need to start putting into place, need to start thinking about to preserve mentorship and the value of it, and also to preserve these kind of pipelines of development from their junior staff
Yeah.
acquiring the expertise they need to thrive?
I think that's a really good question, because I think as well with all of the AI transformation, there's a bit of formal learning that might be built into the transformation, but it misses a lot of the more teams-based skills development and career progression piece. So if I'm team leader, budgets are tight, HR are busy. It's actually thinking beyond the formal HR programs. What can I continue to preserve in the team that I run to improve collaboration and a sense of belonging and relationship building, and then to help maintain that skills development and ongoing sort of career progression. And as a team leader, there's a lot I can do for free that is part of running a team. And so regular team meeting cycles and strategy days of bringing people together and having collaboration and allowing everyone to have an input, having buddy systems in the team. Often you've got multiple teams in a function that work together fairly regularly. So having cross-team projects, it might be the culture review results and what are we going to do to solve some of the issues, but doing that collaboratively across teams. So you're supporting relationships at the same time. So all of that around that sense of belonging and feeling that you have a voice. And then I think on the more technical side of thinking through things like work shadowing and the observation piece around how do I maintain. I'm inviting someone into the board meeting or into the exec meeting. I'm bringing them into a negotiation and I'm saying they're just here to learn, they're observing. So not giving them necessarily a formal role, but allowing them to watch it play out. And then there's all sorts of work shadowing, and there's also kind of communities of practice where people can share what they've learned in a fairly formal or informal way. Then I think there is the more mentoring programs. So you might not have the budget for external coaches, but you can have, again, those sort of buddy systems, or you've got people across the organization that you say, I really think you'd get a lot of value from meeting this person regularly or one-off. And there's reverse mentoring as well, which I love, where you might have grads that have just come from a really technical TAFE program and actually allowing them to show the really, experienced engineers, this is how we do it. This is what I've taught. And for the others who have been there for 50 years, that's completely different. And why have they taught it that way? And this is what I was taught. And you have a conversation.
Yeah.
The sorts of things of there's the observation, there's the mentoring, and then I think there's the actual stretch of making sure that everyone in my team has a development plan. I understand where they want to go, and I'm stretching them, whether that's a project, getting them involved in a different team's piece of work, internal secondments and rotations, external secondments, but really making sure that you're stretching people as you go along. And all of that doesn't necessarily need HR. And sorry, I know I'm talking too long now, but the other one I really like is reflecting. So I did this leadership program last year, and they didn't call it reflecting, but it was the moments where as soon as a crisis has happened or a decision's been made or a project is sort of something's been delivered, in that moment saying, how are we feeling? What worked, what didn't work? And just it's a 5-minute debrief, a 10-minute debrief before you leave the room. And then a week later or 2 weeks later, you have a slightly more formal version of that. And then at the end of the project or the end of the program, you have a post-implementation review. But that constant reflecting, learning, talking about the judgment that happened, what worked, what didn't work, where did the relationships fray, all of those things I think will help everyone to continue to learn in the team and to build their muscle and their kind of career as well. So lots of different ideas there, but I think things that we can do without help as such.
And they're really, really great tools for building that human muscle, right? And we talk a lot about that. Building the human muscle is actually in the book. We're like focused on build your human kind of EQ as well as your IQ in order to be relevant, because there's so much that a human is going to be able to deliver to the machine. The machine is never, in theory, ever going to be able to do. But at the same time, I think the other great debate that's going on in organizations at the moment is access to the tools is only really, I think access to the tools is 25% of it. 75% of it is what are you going to do with those tools? What are you going to do with AI? How are you going to integrate it into your work? And I think the problem at the moment is there's this expectation that people will just pick up the tools and figure it out as part of their day job, and an expectation that's going to deliver great outcomes every time. So just one before we wrap up, just a kind of a reflection on, in addition to everything you've just said, which we are completely in alignment with, what else do you think we need to think about perhaps from an AI perspective? So learning the AI part as well as the
Yeah.
human part.
Yeah, I think actually this does come back to sort of more group mentoring and sharing, those sort of knowledge shares of, and I've felt this myself. It's like, right, you've all got this AI tool today. And then 2 days later, it's like, stand up if you've used AI yet. And it's like, oh, but how was I
Yeah.
supposed to use it? And I don't quite understand. And so I put a Google question in AI and go, I've used AI. And, I'm really not taught what it
You've
can
ticked the
do,
box.
how to do it. And it looks so deceptively simple when you go in, you're just asking it a question, but how to actually build agents and do the right prompts and all of that, it does need to be learnt, and I can experiment and play around with it. But sometimes I feel I'm kind of wasting more time because I haven't done the formal learning, or I haven't got someone sitting next to me showing me what they've done. And so I think with AI, it would be really good to bring the concept of mentoring and learning more into the room in a small team environment to go, who did something awesome with AI today? Can you show us? Can you, what have you done that worked? What didn't work? What went spectacularly wrong? And all of those kind of little shares every day, every week as part of your team, I think
Yeah.
can be really powerful. So not, again, relying on the massive transformation project that's running 1,000,000 miles an hour and, a small handful of people in it on a different floor in a different building, but within your teams of really thinking through, how do we want to use this? What's working? What's not working? Are we worried about judgment? Is it atrophying anybody's skills? Where do we need to constantly course correct? And I think you guys talk about in your book where you've got people that are resisting change, that it's
Right.
not always, it can be the canary in the coal mine around actually what is it that they're resisting? Are they worried about quality? Are they worried about, trust and relationships? Is there some risk inherent in here that they're seeing that we haven't yet? And
Yeah.
having those conversations, I think, can be really powerful if everyone is doing this together rather than it happening to you.
But actually, I think one of the fastest ways to learn and grow and develop the skills around AI is to be in a group. And it's more fun because you can sit there and chat to people about what you're doing and figure out new ways of doing it and move much more quickly, I think, that way than kind of sitting there on your own. Sitting there on your own is also very effective, but also quite a lonely experience.
A lot of people, sort of on LinkedIn and other things as well, of kind of saying I've spent time on my own and I've really dived into learning AI, but it's a long process. It's not a few hours and I know how to use it. It's days and weeks and months of really training yourself on how to use it effectively. And
Yeah.
most people are insanely busy. Like they're already working the 8-hour shifts, 10, 12, 15-hour days. And then to go, can you just add another, couple of months of learning on top of that? So you might experiment with it and go down a rabbit hole that you know it's not quite right and it might actually be making you less efficient, but you feel pressured to use it because you have to say it's being successfully implemented and you've got to demonstrate to everyone else that you're using it. But you kind of intrinsically know that you're not using it well, but finding the time to learn how to use it properly. And actually someone just sitting down with you and demonstrating, oh, you're just doing this and this. It's a bit like the old schools of me trying to figure out Excel. It's like someone shows me, oh, you just do Control A. And I'm like, cool.
Yeah.
This
It was as simple as
circumvented
that.
something I was doing wrong for 5 years. Like,
I guess I've sort of personally been in the fortuitous position of, being from leaving my last job, then having a lot of time on my hands as I built Average Robot before, Rob got involved even. And that learning curve is a kind of a luxury. Most people don't get that time. And this is the challenge, I think, that the risk for people inside organizations isn't actually, I'm going to train the machine to take my job away. The risk is they're not going to learn quickly enough to be the person that is controlling the machine to get the work done. And I think that's where all the things you've been talking about in terms of mentoring, training, coaching is going to be so important, because companies will lose some of their best people through that attrition if they don't take on responsibility for training those people up and getting them to that place.
Yeah. And I think you guys might have said this before, that if you're not spending the same amount of money on the workforce and the training that you are on the IT itself, you're probably not going to get what you were looking for from it, because so much of this is about confidence and and trust that I still have a job at the end of it, and that this is, again, augmenting rather than sort of removing humans
Right.
from the process.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Excellent.
Yeah.
One final. Oh, sorry, Matt. You got to follow up on that.
No, it's good. You go.
I was just going to say, as a sort of a final question, what are you most excited about when it comes to everything that's happening in AI?
I think I love there's so many great use cases.
Uh-huh.
So it's that, how are we it is more of that efficiency piece of what are we freeing up that took a lot of time unnecessarily to then really unlock the more human value add to what we do. So bring your expertise to the fore, to bring your experience to the fore, and to be thinking about the future. And one of the things maybe that AI doesn't do, because it's retrospective, it's all based on algorithms and knowledge that it's been fed, is that it can give you today, like up to relatively today information, but it's not doing that. And you talked about this IQ, EQ. It's not doing the FQ work. What's the future quotient, the sort of the thinking, the visionary stuff where we want to be.
Mm.
And so maybe we've got more time for that, for more time for innovation and visionary thinking than because we're not doing the stuff that takes forever, that's all fiddly and kind of very process based.
Yeah, great.
Yeah.
I think we've got our elephant, haven't we? It's FQ.
It is FQ. We've got to be careful how you pronounce that. That could get you in trouble.
And that is actually from an article I read many years ago. So, but I love it. I can find that article for you and send it to you. But it always got me thinking after I read that and this is part of a lot of the work that I've done, again, around org transformation and sustainability and purpose, is it's great to be thinking about performance today and getting the financial information together for the next quarterly report. But what are we doing to embed future thinking, and what are we doing to think about our purpose and our place in society and where we want to be and the impact we want to have? And are we embedding that in our decisions, our learning, our training, our leadership, and so forth? And if we're not, are we again kind of end up having those moments like a number of large organizations where they suddenly run out of runway because someone else has come in with a completely different model?
Yeah.
And so I've always loved that concept of it's not just about thinking about responsibility, but it's thinking about innovation and different models and different ways of working. And AI can help again with that. I mean, it is a whole new way of working, but it's still based on the knowledge we have, not where we want to be. And that's instinctively and distinctively human.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's a great point. That's brilliant.
That's a great way to end, I think, on the human word. So thank you so much for that. That was really, really interesting, insightful, and obviously built on the back of lots and lots of experience. 30 years goes very quickly, but you've absolutely absorbed so much knowledge and skill. So yeah, I really appreciate your time.
And thanks for having me. I can't wait to read the rest of the book.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we are now officially at the stage of we've gone into publishing. So there's still, unfortunately, publishing just means it takes, I think, another 2 to 3 months before it will be actually available on Amazon. But yeah, it's not far away. It's not far away.
Absolutely.
Fantastic. Well, well done. It's a fantastic topic.
Oh,
Thank
great.
you. Yeah.
Thanks very much. Nice to see you. We'll absolutely be in touch and talk to you soon.
Great. Thank you.
Thanks, Janette.
See you, Janette. Bye.
Bye.